The check bounced against Marcus Webb's calloused fingers like a slap disguised as a gift, and the laughter that followed from the mansion's marble steps would haunt him long after the ink had dried. $10,000. A number so small to the man who wrote it, and so cruel in the way it was delivered, that Marcus felt his chest tighten with a shame he hadn't known in decades. He was 61 years old, had spent 30 of those years tending other people's gardens, and had never once been handed money like it was a punchline. But that's exactly what Reginald Ashford had done, tossing the check at his feet from the top step while his golfing buddies chuckled into their crystal tumblers, calling it charity for the help, loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. If this story moves something in you already, take a second right now and hit like, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House if you believe people deserve second chances, because what happened to Marcus next will remind you why kindness always finds its way back around. Marcus had worked the Ashford estate for nearly 11 years. He'd planted the rose beds that made the cover of a regional magazine once, nursed the old oak by the fountain back from disease, and never asked for more than his modest hourly wage, paid inconsistently and often late. He wasn't naive about Reginald's character. Everyone in Cedarbrook Heights knew the Ashford name came with a reputation for looking down on anyone who worked with their hands instead of their portfolio. But Marcus needed the job. His wife, Dorotha, had been battling arthritis that made her own hands curl painfully by evening, and his daughter Simone was 3 semesters from finishing nursing school, so pride was a luxury Marcus had learned to set aside a long time ago. That afternoon, after the laughter died down and the golf cart had rattled off toward the 9th hole, Marcus knelt on the gravel driveway and picked up the check. His hands trembled, not from anger exactly, but from something deeper, an old, familiar ache of being seen as less than. He almost tore it in half right there. Almost let the wind carry the pieces into the hedges he'd trimmed 100 times. But something inside him, some quiet stubborn voice, told him to fold it instead and slide it into his shirt pocket. Dorotha always said that God had a strange sense of humor and an even stranger sense of timing, and Marcus figured the least he could do was see what this particular joke turned into. That evening, sitting at the kitchen table in their small rented house on Persimmon Street, Marcus told Dorotha what happened. She didn't rage or cry, she just reached across the table, covered his rough hand with her swollen fingers, and said something he would repeat to himself many times over the coming year: a seed doesn't care whose hand planted it, cruel or kind, Marcus. It only cares if it gets watered. That night, instead of cashing the check for groceries or bills like any reasonable man might, Marcus did something that surprised even himself. He remembered a conversation from 2 summers back with his nephew Terence, a sharp young man studying finance at the community college, who had once mentioned a small, unknown company developing solar irrigation systems for drought-stricken farms in Africa and the American Midwest. Terence had been so excited about it, rattling off numbers Marcus barely understood, insisting that if it ever took off, early investors would be sitting on something extraordinary. Marcus called Terence that same night. His nephew was stunned into silence when Marcus said he wanted to put the entire $10,000 into that company, a business called Verdant Flow Technologies that barely had 40 employees and a warehouse in Ohio. Terence tried to talk him out of it, warning him it was a gamble, that the stock was penny-priced and volatile, that Marcus could lose it all in a matter of weeks. But Marcus, for the first time in longer than he could remember, felt something other than quiet resignation. He felt defiance. He told Terence that money handed to him as an insult didn't deserve to be spent on insults like light bills and canned beans. It deserved a chance to grow into something nobody could laugh at. The months that followed were not easy, and this is the part of the story people often want to rush past, but it's the part that matters most. Marcus kept showing up to the Ashford estate every single morning at 7, kneeling in the same dirt, trimming the same hedges, absorbing the same dismissive glances from Reginald Ashford, who seemed to have already forgotten the incident entirely, the way powerful men often forget the moments that scar everyone around them. Marcus said nothing about the investment to anyone outside his immediate family. He watched the stock price some nights on Terence's laptop, watched it dip so low in the 3rd month that Dorotha found him sitting on the porch steps at midnight, jaw tight, staring at the number like it was a verdict on his own worth. There were nights he regretted it fiercely, nights he thought about Simone's tuition and wondered if he'd made a fool's decision in a moment of wounded pride. But something kept him steady. It wasn't blind hope. It was the quiet, daily labor of a man who understood patience better than anyone in that glass-walled mansion ever could. Marcus had spent his whole life watching things that seemed dead in winter come back green and stubborn in spring. He knew growth wasn't a straight line. He knew soil had to be turned over before anything good could take root in it. So he kept working, kept planting, kept showing up with the same dignity even when the world around him offered him none. Around the 8th month, Verdant Flow Technologies signed a distribution deal with a coalition of agricultural cooperatives across 3 drought-affected states, and the story of their solar-powered irrigation systems started appearing in trade publications, then a segment on a business news channel, then finally a feature in a national newspaper about small companies solving big climate problems. The stock, which had once traded for pennies, began climbing steadily, then rapidly, as bigger investors took notice. Terrence called Marcus on a Tuesday evening, his voice shaking, telling him to sit down before he said anything else. The $10,000, humiliating and small as it once felt in Marcus's palm, had multiplied past 6 figures. And it kept climbing. By the 10th month, it had crossed $1 million. Marcus didn't tell a single soul at the Ashford estate. He kept trimming the roses, kept sweeping the gravel path, kept nodding politely when Reginald complained about the price of lawn care these days as if Marcus were somehow responsible for inflation itself. There was a peculiar peace in that silence, a private dignity Marcus hadn't felt in years. The quiet knowledge that the joke meant to shrink him had instead become the very thing that would set his family free. At the 12-month mark, almost to the day since that check had been thrown at his feet like scraps to a stray dog, Marcus sat with Dorothy and Simone at their kitchen table and watched the final number settle on the screen. Just over $2.3 million. Dorothy wept, not from shock, but from something closer to vindication, the kind of tears that come when years of quiet suffering finally get answered. Simone, who had grown up watching her father come home each evening smelling of soil and sweat, hugged him so tightly he nearly lost his breath, whispering that she finally understood what he'd always told her, that the way you carry yourself through hard seasons is worth more than any single harvest. Marcus didn't quit the next morning in some dramatic scene of revenge, though the temptation crossed his mind more than once. Instead, he gave his 2 weeks' notice like the professional he'd always been, and on his last day, as he packed away his tools for the final time, Reginald Ashford, having finally heard whispers around the club about a gardener who'd apparently struck it rich, awkwardly asked him what he planned to do next. Marcus simply smiled, the same calm smile he'd worn through every insult, and said he planned to build a nonprofit teaching young people from struggling neighborhoods how to grow their own food and, eventually, their own futures. He said it without bitterness, without needing Reginald to feel small the way Reginald had once tried to make him feel small, because Marcus understood something Reginald likely never would. Dignity isn't something other people can hand you or take away. It's something you grow yourself, season after season, no matter how unkind the hands that plant the seed. Before we get to how this story truly ends, if you've made it this far, do something for me. Type the word, seed, in the comments if you believe good things grow even from the cruelest beginnings, because I read every single one, and I want to know this story reached you. Today, Marcus Webb runs the Fresh Roots Foundation, mentoring dozens of young people across 3 states, teaching them not just how to garden, but how to weather seasons that feel unfair, how to keep tending something even when the world laughs at the size of it. Dorothy's hands are gentler now, thanks to specialists Marcus could finally afford, and Simone graduated at the top of her nursing class, dedicating her diploma to the man who never let humiliation harden his heart. And somewhere in Cedarbrook Heights, the rose beds Marcus once tended still bloom every spring, tended now by someone else, unaware that the quiet man who once knelt in that dirt had grown something far greater than flowers. He had grown proof that kindness, patience, and quiet dignity can outlast even the cruelest joke, and turn it into a legacy nobody could ever take away. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who needs reminding that their season is coming, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because there are so many more stories like Marcus's waiting to remind you that hope, patience, and kindness are never wasted, no matter how small they start.